Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today for this Managing Your Merge Lunch and Learn. If you've got any questions as we go along, please enter them in the Q&A box and we'll answer as many of them as we can at the end of the session. For any that we don't get to, or if we need further clarity on them, we'll be sharing an FAQ in our follow-up email later this week. And along with that, you'll also get the recording of the session. I'm now going to hand you over to Debbie Deeman, Senior Training and Optimisation Consultant here at EMIS Health, who's going to take you through today's session.
Hello everybody, thank you for joining today's session on Managing Your Merge. The best way for you to plan for your organisation merge is to fully understand the process from start to finish. And that's what today's session is all going to be about, is running through the whole process of an EMIS to EMIS merge. And by the end of the session, you will fully understand the process and be able to manage a successful EMIS merge. The first question is, what is an EMIS merge? So an EMIS merge will take place if two or more organisations decide to join together to form one single organisation that will be using one single version of EMIS Web with a unique CDB reference number. Whilst we talk about merges, the words source and target feature a lot. And before I move on with the presentation, I just want to clarify exactly what's meant by these terms. So in this example below, you will see we have two organisations. It's been previously decided that one will become the source and the other will become the target. The source is the site that will be either made into a branch or closed down, and where the data from that source will then be transferred to the target. So in this example here, you will see the source site has the CDB reference number of 1234 and has a total of 2,000 patients. The target site has CDB 5678 with 4,000 patients. So once the merge has taken place, the target will be the remaining organisation containing the information from the patients from the source site, and everybody, including those users from the source site, will now log under the same CDB of 5678. The next thing to be aware of are the parties involved with your merge. It's not just EMIS and yourselves, there's other parties to be aware of. For example, the CCG and the CSU and third-party suppliers. They all need to be notified of your plans and they can help you with the full process of the merge. Also, we need to be aware of your organisation. So the merge will involve two practices or two organisations, and it's really key the communications with yourselves. Part of the planning needs to be understanding how you both currently use EMIS and moving forward how you're going to work in a single way. With regards to EMIS Health, there are a number of departments that are involved. The migration team and the customer fulfillment team will provide you with the information and forms to fill in, and they will also carry out the migration of the data from the source to the target site. You'll be allocated an EMIS Health account manager, excuse me, and they will be able to support you through the process, and there'll be meetings carried out where they can clarify any questions you may have. On the actual go live, you will have an EMIS engineer or trainer if you wish, and they will be there to carry out any configuration or any training and system checks on the day. Another common question is, how do we know which site should become the target site? So for a practice, the primary target site tends to be the larger of the two, obviously because they will have more patients registered there and therefore there'll be more clinical data. So that tends to be the primary site, and the smaller site will become the source where the data will get transferred from. The target site will not lose any data at all, but not to worry you, because the vast majority of clinical data will also get transferred from the source site. And I'm going to go through that in more detail later on in my presentation. So as I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, it's really important to be clear of the full process of a merge. So that's what I'm going to run through next. So here you'll see it's broken down into 6 individual steps. So the first step that you will need to be aware of is the first people to be contacted is not EMIS, it's the actual your CCG or CSU, or if you're in Wales, it's your NWIS, or Northern Ireland, it would be BSO. And tell them your plans and what you intend to do, and they will be able to advise you of the next steps. Because during this time, an order or an invoice needs to be placed before the EMIS side of the process can begin. Step number 2 is the EMIS customer fulfillment call will take place with the organisation. Ideally, you will have representatives from both sides, from the source and the target, so everybody aware of what is being discussed and agreed. During this phone call, once the order has been received, they can then agree a merge date. You'll also have a discussion, so you can decide which one is going to become the source and which will be the target organisation, and also what the plans are for the source site. Will it become a branch or will it be closed down? Things like that. The other thing you will talk about is whether you want to go ahead with having a trainer or an engineer on the day of merge, and these requirements will be discussed. The third step in the process is when your account director that I mentioned earlier will give you a call, and again it's important that you have representatives from each organisation join this call. They will go through in depth all the documentation that has been given you from customer fulfillment so that you are aware of what needs to be filled in and returned to customer fulfillment before the merge can go ahead. It's important to highlight at this stage that any delays in completing this documentation can delay the whole merge process. Following this conversation, they'll always be there to support you, and if you do have any additional questions, you can always get in touch. So step 4 is down to yourselves as the organisation, and it will be a case of filling in all the forms and reviewing them in depth to check you're aware of what needs to be, the information that needs to be supplied. This can be information that needs to be supplied to the migration team as well, which I will highlight an example of that in a minute. The other thing to be aware of is, a bit like a standard go live, you need to ensure your workflow inboxes are cleared in advance of the merge, because otherwise this information will not get transferred, and it's a lot more complicated to resolve this if they've been left in workflow. At this stage also, you will have confirmation that an engineer and a trainer has been booked if that's what you require. Then it's a case of waiting until a day before the go live. On this day, all users need to be logged out of the source site by 1 PM. The target site could continue to work as normal, but the source site needs to be logged out by 1 PM. If they're not, they will automatically be logged out anyway. When I talk about the day before, if the merge is scheduled for a Monday, this means the day before is classed as the Friday, the working day before you go live. The other thing to consider is on the target site that you don't view or edit any of the any of the patients from the source organisation until the merge is fully complete. Then on your go live, you will have the support, if you've requested it, from the trainer and an engineer, and they will then be able to configure the system. And then once the confirmation from the migration team has been received to say the merge is successful, the trainer can support you with any questions and also run through all the system checks. I've included that in this presentation, and I'll be able to show you the areas that we focus on when checking the system. So I've mentioned a few times the documentation that's supplied from the customer fulfillment. One of these documents I want to draw your attention to is the letter of expectation. This is quite a lengthy document, but it's really important that you review it and check you understand everything within it. It outlines the basic process and any limitations, which I'm going to explain to you in a minute. But it also highlights other features that you can request. For example, the Records Apt field on the patient's registration screen. There is an option to have it populated with where the patients from the source site's records are being held. This could be really quite useful, especially if you've got multiple practices merging together. But what this letter outlines is that you need to let the migration team know in advance of the merge for this to happen. If you don't let them know in advance of the merge, this could be chargeable and becomes a lot more complicated thing to achieve. So as I mentioned, the letter of expectation, and also on EMIS Web, there is the details of all the limitations. And I'm going to run through those now so you're aware of how to manage these features. So with regard to the registrations data, the full set of data is going to be transferred from your source to your target site. Any duplicate patients will need to be manually resolved once the merge is fully complete. One thing to consider is not to register any patients from the source site at the target site prior to the merge, if possible, because this will, if you do, this will just result in more duplicate patients that need to be resolved. The GP links and registration side of workflow, lab reports will need to be cleared down, and any transmissions will need to be suspended during this process. Obviously, the lab reports will then be switched on the day of the merge, and then they will be filed against the target site. Care information is transferred, but we do recommend you create and export a list of all the carers with their next of kin information. And this will give you a document to double check the data has come across correctly once the merge is complete. The local RBAC profiles do not get exported. So obviously most of your security profiles are contained on your smart cards. But if you do use local RBAC profiles at the source site, you'd need to export them. Once the merge is complete, you could import them in and then associate them with the relevant users. Patient warnings, all this data does come across, but this is one of the ones I like to highlight to have a discussion between the source and target organisation. Warnings are something that a lot of practices can use in very different ways, so it's worthwhile having that conversation so you can design, so you're aware, all the users are aware of how to use warnings once you're all logging on to the single organisation. One thing you'll notice as well, once the merge is complete, all the target site patients' EMIS numbers will remain the same, but those patients who were originally registered at the source practice will have all their EMIS numbers offset by a fixed number. This isn't standard, this is across all practices. It's determined on a practice by practice basis. But they will stand out, you'll clearly identify that their EMIS number has all got jumped up by, for example, 20,000. Future and past appointment bookings and sessions are not transferred. So this is something that needs to be considered when you're planning your appointment book for the day of the merge. With regards to organisation configuration, users who have at any point entered clinical data or any data against a patient's record, all these users' records will get transferred across from the source to the target. But in the rare event that you have any users that have been set up, they've never actually recorded any data, they will need to be manually set up again at the target site. What I will say though is you will have read-only access to your source site for 3 months after the merge. So obviously you could log in and copy the details of those missing users, including their prescribing codes and things like that. Some duplicate users will occur, and these will need to also be reviewed and deactivated. We recommend that on the day, obviously with the support of the trainer, we will contact the support to let them know that you have multiple duplicate users, and they will advise whether you have to manually resolve them or whether that's something they can do by running a script. Another thing to make you aware of is If a duplicate user has been deactivated and that particular user did previously authorise some repeat medication, those medications will require reauthorising when they're next issued for a patient. Any branches or locations that were previously set up on the source site will be transferred to the target organisation, but it's really important not to set these up at the target prior to the migration. If you do need to set up any additional branches, these need to be set up once the merge is fully complete. Teams need to be also considered. So again, this is something between the two organisations you need to have a chat about, really. So the questions really are you going to be working, do you want to update your existing GP teams for tasks to add the members of staff from the source site, or are you going to be working separately? So do you need to have a GP at site A team and a GP at site B team so that you can task the different groups of clinicians separately? So it's just something to consider, and if you plan in advance, it saves us having to decide on the day of the merge. Prescribing and dispensing. So all current past drugs and matched drugs will come across during the transfer. Any locally defined formularies will need to be exported and imported, though, the ones from the source site I'm referring to here. EPS, so electronic repeat dispensing, sorry, I can't get my words out, needs to be reviewed at the source site. And if you do have any patients that currently use EPS repeat dispensing, these will need to be cancelled prior to the merge and then reissued at the target organisation. Otherwise, you can end up with future scripts being trapped on the spine and unable to pull them down. Medication configuration, that needs to be reviewed between yourselves as organisations, because it's quite common for you to work in different ways. So you just need to address that you can agree on a single way to have your medication area of the workflow configured. If you're a dispensing practice, plans will need to be made to ensure your queue is cleared down and a record of stock taken. And you may also need to contact your wholesalers to get copies of the codes that are required to reconfigure your dispensing once the merge is complete. Population reporting needs to also be considered. So at the source site, if you have any locally configured searches that don't exist on the target site, these will need to be exported and imported once the merge is complete. One thing to bear in mind, if you have got two organisations that are merging that are both on SNOMED, if you've got a read coded site merging with a SNOMED one, you need to consider that some of the searches may become read only. The good news is all clinical data, including free text, is transferred. This also includes consultations, numeric data, file attachments, referral letters, scanned documents, etc. It also includes any unmatched clinical data, so this won't disappear. It will still need to be reviewed at the source site. I know the majority of England are on SNOMED, but obviously we have other sites that are currently on read. So moving forward, if we get to the situation where the target site is on SNOMED and the source site is on read, the read site will be converted to SNOMED during the merge. If you have the situation where the target site is using read coding and the organisation site is on SNOMED, the merge cannot take place until the target site has actually been moved to SNOMED. Sharing agreements, if there's any sharing agreements that are active at the target organisation, these will be applied to the source organisation patients. Legacy data mapping, that won't be resolved for you by magic. That will get transferred from the source site to the target site and will need to be mapped in the same way. As I mentioned previously, all tasks in the workflow will need to be cleared prior to the merge. Anything that remain will be lost or be frozen on that source site. You won't be able to automatically get that into the target site. So it will involve conversations with PCSE and things like that. So as you can imagine, it becomes a longer process. The other thing to be aware of is clearing out your inboxes well in advance of your merge, ideally 7 days before you go live. Just so you don't, if there's any that are trickier to resolve, it gives you that time to get those resolved before the merge. The other thing is you need to notify your labs because you don't want to be receiving any further tasks coming into the workflow. So they need to be suspended. And you do also need to consider a plan for any urgent results that need to come through, for example, paper or telephone. Other inboxes to consider if you get any electronic discharge out of hours documents into the documents area of workflow. These will need to be suspended and then reactivated once the merge is complete. All patient tasks come across, but any admin tasks do not get migrated, merged across, so you'll need to print any that you need for future reference. Admin searches, templates, protocols, they do not get, if there's any that only exist at the source site, they will need to be exported onto your desktop and imported once the merge is fully complete. Documents. So any documents or letters saved in the care record, these will be transferred across. Any attached documents or scanned documents, again, these will also be carried across during the transfer. But because DocMan is a third-party provider, it's important to liaise with them during this merge process right from the beginning. Any scanned documents that have not yet filed into the care record, they will need to be filed prior to the merge or rescanned into the target's organisation following the merge. If you've got any document templates that are unique to the source site, again, they're the ones where you've added the merge fields. You will need to export those and import those manually once the merge is complete. I'm aware this is a lot of information to absorb, and what I'm going to show you now is that it is currently available on EMIS now. So if I just click on this link here, it's just taking me to EMIS now. You can search on EMIS now and just put EMIS Web Merge, and it will bring this information up for you. But you'll see here there is a document which details all the limitations, including the information I've shared today. Another thing that's really important to be aware of is how patient access is affected during a merge. What's really important to be aware of is that the online service accounts at the source organisation will not be transferred, and patients need to be aware that they will need to link or re-register their patient access account to the new organisation. As an organisation, you don't have to do anything to online services within the source organisation. However, we do recommend before the merge that you print a list of all the patients who are currently registered for online access at the source site. The key thing also is to make patients aware of this change. They will still log in with the same email address and password, but once the merge is complete, until they've been re-registered to use online access at the target organisation, they will get a message to say this service is no longer offered. So it's important they need to be aware of this and to say that this is normal and you're expecting this. The patients don't have to close their account, and they cannot re-register until the merge is fully complete. As I just mentioned, they need to have their own unique email address, but they should have that if they already use online services, patient access at the source site. I think the real clarity needs to be is that they don't need to change their password. They log in, use the same password. It's just linking through to the target organisation. Another thing to consider is enabling the ability for patients to change their address details in patient access so they can update their details in advance. When it comes to the day of the merge or after the merge, you need to decide and agree between yourselves as an organisation how you're going to process these patients who need to get their online patient access account up and running. So there are two ways you can do it. So if you look to the right hand side of this slide, you'll see there's a pink and a blue way. So the first way is to issue a new registration letter. So this option is exactly the same as if the patient was new to online service. The only thing you don't need to do is actually see their ID again. You will record that it was seen previously at the source site. So you will find the patients off the search, the report that you've printed out. You will go to their registration screen, you will add their online account, and you will then email them their registration letter. They will then be able to link through to the account using this registration letter when they next log on to use patient access. The other option is enabling online registrations. So if you don't currently use that at your practice, this will need to be activated in the EMIS manager for this to work. And again, this can be activated in advance, but obviously it will allow people at your target to register for online access. This option will then enable them at the point when they find out that the source site is not offering patient access. They will then be prompted to search for the new target organisation, and then they can then select to register online for online access. This will enable the patient to book a single appointment. They won't be able to do anything else till yourselves as the organisation verifies their account. So obviously you'll be cross-referencing it with that report I mentioned previously. So pre-merge system access. Another question is, can we use a target site? Can we use a source site? Well, how long can we use it for? So the main thing to be aware of is at the source site, you'll be able to use the system at the source site until 1 p.m. the day before the merge go live. And as I mentioned earlier, the day before, if your merge is a Monday, will be the Friday before. It's the working day before your merge go live. If you don't log off by 1 p.m, the system will automatically log you off anyway. With regards to the target site, the organisation can continue to work as normal throughout the merge process, but the key thing to it is not to be tempted to edit any patients from the source site until you've had confirmation that the merge is fully complete. So all the preparation has been carried out, you've attended all the meetings, you've filled in the forms, you've cleared out all your workflow tasks, and now it's just a case of for it all to happen. So how do you know it's happening? So the migration team will be sending you a series of emails during the last steps of the migration. When the the merge starts, the migration team will send you an email to notify you that the merge has started. Then it's a case of waiting. So from this point on, it's just a case of to know it's happening, and you will then receive one to say it's completed, and you can go ahead and carry out the checks. But it is quite common between the start email and the complete email to receive one to say failed records. Don't be alarmed if you do get this. It's quite common. It's just meaning that certain patients' records have not transferred across, and it's to let you know that the merge team and migration team are working hard to resolve these. And what they're warning you is don't start merging any duplicate patients or archiving any patients or users until you've had the next email confirming that it's complete. So myself, as a trainer who supports on a merge go live, I'll also be in touch with the migration team, but I'll also check with yourselves, have you had that email to confirm that the merge is complete? Once that email is received, then we can start working through the checks and making sure that you're happy that it's a successful merge. So the final part of my presentation is I'm going to run through these checks just to make you aware. Obviously, you won't be expected to remember these, and it's something that we can support you with to carry out on the day of the merge. So the first check we'll do is we'll run a search to confirm the patient count is correct. So that's one way of identifying that it's happened and also that the correct number of patients are there. Once we've confirmed this, we'll then go into population reporting and we'll check the QOF standard QOF reports contain patients from both organisations. If you do use the FP34D standard report that's provided by EMIS, rather than running your own locally defined searches for claims, you may need to check this to check no other additional injections need to be added that were used at the source site that the target site don't use. Another important priority once the checks start is to focus on the user management. Obviously, if you've got duplicate users, you don't want to have the situation where, for example, a doctor is logged in with their user and someone has configured the appointment book to look at the other user. So another little tip is to plan ahead really and make sure you know which user you intend on deactivating once the merge is complete. A lot of practice it find beneficial to put an X next to their name or just somewhere a dot next to their name, so that you can see when you're configuring your appointment book that if you've got the incorrect user. So that's why part of the checks is we need to focus on deactivating any X staff, adding any missing users, importing any local RBAC profiles and adding them to the relevant users, and also deactivating any duplicate users once we've spoken to EMIS support for any advice. The other thing to consider is duplicate patients. Again, this is quite common because your patient may have been seen at both the source and the target site. So again, the trainer can advise you, but we can look and show you how to resolve the duplicate users and identify which one you want to merge with the other. Now, the important thing to be aware of at this stage is that they're merged as an attachment. So it's important to make sure that the relevant patient with the most clinical data is made the main patient record. If you're a pooled list, again, you may need to carry out a GP reallocation to ensure all the patients are registered to the correct dummy member of staff that's used for the pooled list registrations. As I mentioned earlier, if you have requested that records app field to be populated, we will find some source organisation patients and check that this field has been populated. The other thing we'll do is we'll check the organisation details. So during this process, you'll have decided what the outcome is, the target. Is it going to have the same name, or are you going to have a new name for the practice now that you've merged two smaller organisations? If so, we need to double check that the information there is correct and the correct address is displayed. If you're working, if the source site is going to become a branch site, you may need to set up the branch as well and ensure that the address that's going to print on the script is correct. Smart cards may need synchronizing for some of the users if new roles have had to be added. And it's important to check, like I mentioned previously, that users are logged in with the correct user and they're only logged in once. If any GPs that previously only worked at the source site need to have their names added on any Choose and Book e-referrals, you need to make sure that they're set up as a service person. Part of the checks for medication and prescribing is we will review the drug formularies for accuracy. We will check the configuration, so hopefully you'll have decided if anything needs to be tweaked there. And you can check a few patients to check that the script destination is transferred correctly as part of the merge. The other thing you need to do is check the users can issue medication correctly. And if they can't, we may need to review their user profiles, check they've got the correct prescribing code set up. If you are a dispensing practice, the dispensing configuration will also need to be completed at this time. We'll then move into the appointment book. So we need to double check that all the session holder filters in your appointment book. So you know you may have a doctor's filter, a nurse's filter, an all staff filter. You need to double check that all the correct users are in those filters. You don't want the name that's going to be the deactivated staff in there. You need to make sure the correct members of staff feature in those filters. You need to review all your sessions as well and schedules, and check any patients booked at the source are booked in at the target site. If you've newly created a branch as part of this process, it's really beneficial to create new filters for the branch, session location filters. And this is what we can show you and help you have different colour headings for the sessions that are taking place at the different locations. And you'll also be able to filter to identify these. If you have set up a new location during this configuration, any existing session templates that you've used will need to be opened, and then you'll need to populate the correct location. Otherwise, they won't be included in the filters. Workflow Manager. So what you'll need to do then is we'll need to go into the configuration, you know, the grey cog within the Workflow Manager. And in there we can talk about and review whether anyone needs to be added as global viewers, whether they need to have deputies added so that they can see the deputy filters, etc. Other things to consider are the GP codes correct in the trading partners. Task escalation settings may need amending. So during this process, sometimes practice managers or deputy managers have changed. So you want to make sure that the tasks are escalated to the correct members of staff. Other things to consider are the task default settings, and also review if the lab links are linked as specific to the source, that they've been reconfigured correctly. So as I mentioned in the limitations, if you have exported any documents to import, so from the template manager, you'll need to import those, otherwise they won't be available. And if you've got any third-party products, so for example, DocMan, online test requests, you may need to go into EMIS Manager, review these, because you may need to update the users' names and passwords to enable the clinicians to request online test requests, use DocMan on the day of the merge. So as I mentioned briefly, all of the information that I've covered today is available on EMIS Web, and what I'm going to do is just click in here to show you. Again, as I said before, if you go into EMIS Web and EMIS Now, sorry, and search for EMIS Web Merge, it will take you to this page, and here you can see there's information on ordering an EMIS Web to EMIS Web Merge. There is the pre-merge considerations and limitations of merge. You'll also see on there, if I just click on this now and open up this document, there is a useful document provided for you to fill in during the preparation time to check you've contacted your partner products, entered out your inbox, planned for your appointment book, etc. That concludes my session. Hopefully you found it useful to understand all the steps that go through an EMIS Web to EMIS Web Merge. And I'd just like to ask if there's any questions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. So if you have got any questions, please keep writing them in the comment box. I have been going through as we've been going, so just keep adding to there if you have any more questions. So I'm just going to pick up a few questions. So with the question that's come in, should all third-party providers be notified of the merge beforehand? If the third-party providers link into EMIS sorry, yes, so if they should link into EMIS, then yes, we would recommend that you notify them, third-party providers. If not, then they should continue to work the same if they don't migrate into the EMIS system. I think we've had to. Sorry, I'm trying to keep up with the questions here.
Thank you, Catherine.
So there's another question for the following a merge. E.g., if the merge is at 8 o'clock on a Monday, can both sites work as normal, answer the phone, book appointments, etc.? Or is it advisable that they open later in the morning unless urgent to allow relevant checks? So we would say with the target site, if you've got appointment books currently set up and working, i.e. on the morning, so if previously they've been set up into a target site with the appointment books that are going to be then moving forward, then yes, you would still be able to work from the start of going live, but it may be like any EMIS Web go live, you might want to give yourselves a bit of time for that. Consider that if there are any checks that need happening, or if there's anything gone wrong with transferring or the appointment books, you might want to give yourself a bit of leeway. So yes, you should be able to work if you've already set up the appointment books, but it might be beneficial just to give yourself a bit of leeway in the morning. But the relevant checks, sorry.
Yeah, especially if you've got a new branch and you want to get those filters done, it's quite nice to allow a bit of time just to get so you're comfortable and everyone's got the correct filters associated with their appointment book.
Thank you, David. So when it comes to I've got another one for the online services. So when you have to re-register, any patients having to re-register with patient access, would they have to do the same if it was the NHS app or another? So I would recommend that the patient would check any apps that they're using, because there's potential that they would have to re-register if they were using another NHS app or any other. So with Sunquest ICE configuration being transferred or to new accounts, this is something that would be part of the checks when we do our merge go live checks. We would make sure that the target site has now got all the correct users as would have been in the source site. So any new users to the target site would need to make sure that they have an account set up in their workflow system. So on the new target sites, we would be something that would check on the configuration day. Sorry, I think I've got quite a few duplications on some of these questions. Will post-dated scripts need to be cancelled? So take it this is for EPS or even any other. If the system, the source site, is no longer going to be active once you've gone live into a target site, there is no system to push out the post-dated scripts. So yes, any that haven't gone across pre-going live to the new site, the target site, will need to be cancelled and resent. Timescales from start to finish of the merge process. This is something that you would need to be discussing with your account director. So if you've got any particular go live date that you would require, it's something that you'd need to discuss with the account director going forward, and make sure that you have got the availability to get that merged in on time.
I did, and when I made some inquiries about the timescales, it does vary on a organisation by organisation, and a lot of it will kick off as soon as the invoice or order has been arranged, and then as soon as you can get that through to EMIS, then they can give you an idea of the timescale of when your merge can actually happen.
How long does the go live process take? The go live process will start off from 8 o'clock in the morning, and it can take a majority of the day to make sure that all patients have come across and everything has come across as it should, but it should be that 1 day go live process. With the smart cards, so do you need to resync all smart cards on the morning? Anybody that's working at the target site currently should not need to resync the smart cards, and if you've got new members of staff coming over from the source site, then they would need to resync this. They would need to synchronize the smart cards. Can you book source patients into the appointment book before the merge occurs? No, because the patients won't have merged across to the target site until the go live morning, so you wouldn't be able to book the source site patients in until that go live morning. So just trying to see if we've got any more questions here that we can answer. If we haven't been able to answer any of the questions on this live Q&A, we will get back to you once we've double checked and made sure we've got the correct information to pass on. So we've got one, will you be doing any training sessions on another system to EMIS Web and things to consider? What training packages are offered? We wouldn't be doing any training sessions on other systems, but if you do check on our EMIS Now page, any considerations pre-go live will be on there. And if there needs to be training for, say, a source site that hasn't moved over to the target, then that again is something that you'd need to discuss with your account director to see if there's any further training sessions that would need to be purchased after the merge. How do you deal with the mesh messages going to the source site? Do you pause these? The mesh detail is something that you would need to give into our support team, or the team that are going to be setting up your data migration. So any messages that are continuing to go to the source site after that, then they would need to be redirected to the new target site. So it's something that you would need to get in touch with our technical team to make sure that this is going to go ahead. I've had a question for, could you book them in as unregistered? I'm guessing this is for any source patients going into the target site pre the merge. You could book them in as an unregistered patient, but to get their name in the appointment book, but just be aware that if you do book them in as an unregistered patient and their appointment time is, say, 8:20 on the merge go live day, they may not have merged over yet, because it can take a bit of time just to make sure that all patients are being merged in, and it could take a number of hours. So if you do book them in early on in the morning, there needs to be that consideration that you may not have access to the full patient record, but it is a possibility that you can book them as an unregistered. Do the audit trails from the source site merge across? I would double check. I'd have to double check on this, but as far as I'm aware, they are a new CDB. So anything that's been done in an old CDB number would not have the audit trail, just like you would if you were moving to a new system. It's as it is from that new customer database number. I think for all the questions there that I'm aware of and able to answer, we've gone through them. So if you have got any more questions, do you want to just pop them on? If I haven't got to your question, it is something that we'll get back to you with. Just a confirmation, sorry, with the audit, it isn't something that you are able, as I just was aware of. So if it's a new customer database number, like the target site would be from the source, then there's no audit trail from the previous system. If the target site are unable to see full patient records straight away following the merge, would they still be shown at the source site? If you've still got access to the source site logins, yes, the patient would still be, you'd still be able to see the patient record at the source site, but there is the consideration that if you are working in a different building at the target site, or if you've not got the source site logins, then you do be aware that you've not got access to that patient record then. So I think that is all the questions answered as we've got there, unless there are any more.
I think that looks like everything, guys. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Debbie. That was great. For anybody that does have any last minute questions after we've ended the session, you do still have a few minutes to type them in, and we will be able to pick those up, so I won't pull the questions off for sort of half an hour or so, to give you a chance to add them if you want to. As Catherine said, we will be circulating an FAQ document as part of the follow-up with answers to those questions on there as well. So if we've not got to you, we will come back to you. It's not that we've ignored your question, we just want to make sure that we've got all the relevant information for you before we come back to you. So thank you all for joining. Hopefully you've seen some other sessions as part of EMIS Health Live that are of interest to you. There's still time to sign up to them. So if you visit the website, the remaining sessions are on there across the rest of this week and next week. Thank you again.